I wish to talk a little bit about an individual to whom we are all indebted, brothers and sisters. Khadija bint Khuwaylid, salamullahi alayha. You know, in history, the vast overwhelming majority of people come into this world, live out their lives, enjoy themselves, they suffer along as well, and eventually die, never to be remembered again. The majority of people. Then again, you have people who perform certain tasks and do things that immortalize them. They literally alter the course of human history. And this group of people, even though they're a tiny minority, they come in both good and bad flavors. You have the worst of the worst who were consequential in causing so much damage to the human chronicles. And I could list many names, and I'm sure you can think of many yourself. Then you have people whose sacrifices and whose actions were so incredibly beautiful that they ended up providing humanity with infinitely precious gifts that we all become indebted to them. One of them, perhaps one of the single most important, was Khadija, salamullahi alayha. You've all heard the prophetic hadith. And the hadith, by the way, has been mentioned in multiple contexts, which tells you that the Prophet didn't make this statement just once, but on many, many different occasions. مَا أَبْدَلَنِ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا مِنْهَا. In fact, just merely reading the hadith, you know that there was context behind it. There was a backstory. The Prophet says, Allah never replaced me with anyone better than Khadija. The Prophet married many women, but none was like Khadija. Why? The Prophet says, آمنت بي حين كفر بي الناس. She believed me when everyone belied me. Everyone abandoned me. Everyone refused to acknowledge my status. And yet she believed me. وصدقتني حين كذب بي الناس. She not only had faith in me, but believed everything I told her when everyone accused me of being a liar. وواستني بمالها حين حرمي الناس. And she consoled me with her wealth when I was driven out by everyone. I was not supported by anyone other than Khadija. وَرُزِقْتُ الْوُلْدَ مِنْهَا وَلَمْ أُرْزَقْ مِنْ غَيْرِهَا. And I was blessed with children from her, but not from anybody else. All the other wives of the Prophet, either in some cases they had children who passed away, like Maria al-Qibtiyya and her son Ibrahim, or they were barren, they were infertile, they didn't have any children. Now, why this matters is the bravest person isn't simply the soldier who happens to be in an army that is so well equipped it could crush the enemy. That doesn't make you a brave soldier, does it? A brave soldier is one who continues to advance in the enemy's direction while everyone is fleeing, everyone is deserting. Which is why Rasulullah is quoted to have said to Abi Dharr, Ya Aba Dharr, الذاكر في الغافلين كالمقاتل في الفارين. The one who remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a community of people who are distracted from God's remembrance is like the one who charges towards the enemy while everyone is deserting their positions. Khadija did what no one did to Rasulullah. She was the first believer along with Ali ibn Abi Talib. But of course, in order to diminish her status, they've relegated her position to the first among the women to believe in Rasulullah. And we all know why they do that. They do it because they want to give something. They're so desperate to offer some rank or status to their idols and make them among the first adults to believe in Rasulullah, the first of the elderly to believe in Rasulullah, even though he wasn't even number 50 in the list of those who embraced Islam. But in order to do that, they have to diminish the status of Khadija, the first to believe in the Holy Prophet when everyone abandoned him. Sahih Muslim, other sources in the Sunni tradition have stated the following, that Aisha said, I was never envious towards the other wives of the Holy Prophet the way I was envious of Khadija, even though I never met her. Imagine the jealousy, imagine the envy, imagine the hatred. She's not even around anymore, and yet she acknowledges that she was jealous. And she says that وَإِنِّي لَمْ أَدْرُكْهَا قالت وَكَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. This I want you to focus on. The Holy Prophet, وَكَانَ, in Arabic when they say that such a person, for example, كَانَ يَفْعَلُ كَذَا, it means that he did it repeatedly. It didn't happen just on one occasion, but it happened over and over again. وَكَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِذَا ذُبِحَ الشَّاةِ. If they offered the Prophet a gift, if they gave him a sheep, for example, the Holy Prophet would cut the sheep into pieces almost every time. وَكَانَ يَقُولُ أَرْسِلُوا بِهَا إِلَىٰ أَصْدِقَاءِ خَدِيجَةِ. Take this to the friends of Khadija. Which tells you why she was so envious. Not only did Rasulullah speak of the merits of Khadija and her virtues, but he remained so loyal to her that even after her death, he would honor her friends. إِلَىٰ أَصْدِقَاءِ Khadija, the friends of Khadija. Those who remained loyal companions to Khadija. And this is partly because that we all know Khadija was abandoned by the women of Quraysh. When she decided to marry the Holy Prophet, everyone began to mock her. Imagine being ostracized. Imagine being abandoned. Even though you're an A-lister, you're an elite in the community and the group of people who were considered millionaires and billionaires, Khadija was the top person. Everyone looked up to her. Suddenly, those in her inner circle, those that she considered friends, all abandoned her, to the point that when she gave birth to Fatima Zahra, no one came to help her. We've all heard this. And so the few friends that Khadija did have, Rasulullah was so loyal to Khadija that every gift he received, he would send to them. And I want to say just something about this, if I may. Brothers and sisters, Rasulullah looked after the people who were considered among the friends of Khadija. And that means that if you and I did things that would elevate our rank to the friends of Khadija, Rasulullah would look after us as well, wouldn't he? How can we become friends of Khadija? In fact, I encourage the sisters to organize programs in honor of Lady Khadija and call that group Asdiqa'u Khadija. As well as the brothers. We should honor Khadija by ensuring that the misconceptions, the lies, the stories concocted against her are erased and corrected. I'm sure many of you have heard that when Rasulullah married Khadija, Khadija was 40 years old and Rasulullah was 25. That's a lie. That's a lie that's been picked up from sources that have allegiance towards women who hated Khadija, who were envious of Khadija. They say that Khadija, and I'll talk a little bit about this now inshallah, they say that Khadija was 40 years old when she got married to Rasulullah, number one. Number two, she already had children from previous marriages, which tells you that she had been married multiple times. And they mentioned a few names prior to getting married to Rasulullah. Why do they say that? So as to elevate the rank of that individual who was envious of Khadija and say she was the only virgin that Rasulullah married. and that she was so young. In fact, she was so young, she was 6 years old. All these lies are designed to elevate the rank of this individual, and in doing so, diminish the value of Khadija bint Khuwaylid salamullahi alayhi. And the sad reality is, many of us, followers of the Ahlul Bayt, have fallen for these lies. There were a few things that Khadija was not. As I said, one of them was that she was 40 years old. There is compelling, conclusive, definitive evidence that Khadija was around 25 years of age when she married Rasulullah. There are reports that say she was as young as 23, and there are reports that say, within our tradition, that she was 28. But the majority of those references say that she was 25, and it's the average. If we wanted to average out those references, she was 25 years old. End of discussion. Who cares what Ibn Kathir says? Who cares what the Dhahabi says? Who cares what Bukhari and Muslim say? Because we know that they had nefarious intentions. We know why they did that and why they made up those lies. So, Khadija was not 40 years old, number one. Number two, Khadija had not been married before getting married to Rasulullah. Report after report, hadith after hadith says that Khadija was looking for Rasulullah her entire adult life. Khadija had heard reports from Christian monks, from people who were well versed in ancient scriptures about the advent of the final messenger. She had kept herself to get married to that man because there were indications that his advent was imminent. It was going to happen very soon, and it was going to happen in Mecca. That's why the Jews and the Christians had gone to Mecca. They knew all of this. Khadija didn't. There is even one report where she heard from someone about the attributes of the final messenger of Allah, and Khadija prayed to Allah that I wish to be his wife. By the way, Khadija's religion was the Hanifiyya. Khadija was a member of Quraysh. In fact, she was related to Rasulullah. Khadija's great-great-grandfather was the same of Rasulullah. So they were related, and just like many members of Bani Hashim, like Abu Talib, Abdul Muttalib and others, they followed the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam, which is called Al-Hanifiyya. Khadija was a believer. Khadija never prostrated before an idol. Khadija was expecting Rasulullah and waiting for him, which is why she waited until she was about 25 years old, never getting married to anyone else. Now I know this opens the door to the question about the two daughters of Khadija and Zainab and Kulthum, or Ruqayya and Zainab, and whether they were the daughters of Rasulullah or Khadija's sister Hala, and all of this discussion. I believe, once again, almost definitively, almost 100%, that they were all children of Khadija and Rasulullah. They were the sisters of Fatima Zahra. That does not diminish the status of Fatima Zahra in any way, shape or form. But they were, without a doubt, the daughters of Rasulullah and the daughters of Khadija. There was no previous marriage, as I said. So that's one thing that Khadija was not. The other thing that Khadija was not was a quote-unquote businesswoman. I'm sure you've heard this again from different sources. Oh, Khadija was a businesswoman. No, she was not. At least she most definitely was not a so-called businesswoman as or during the time she was married to Rasulullah. Why? Khadija was the wealthiest woman and perhaps the wealthiest individual in the Arabian Peninsula. She was the equivalent of the central bank now. She would lend money to other businesses. Other wealthy merchants would come and borrow money from her. There's no question about that. How she was able to accumulate all of that wealth is irrelevant. Whether it was an inheritance from her father who was killed in a battle, whether it was her business activities, buying and selling, being a merchant, having caravans that work for you, again, that's irrelevant. What is important is this. When people tell you that Khadija was a businesswoman, that's usually in the context of women being in the workforce. People who talk about Khadija's business activities are trying to portray her as someone who was almost like, working from 9 to 5. She has an office, she goes out there and she makes money while Rasulullah does his thing. Far from it. Far from it. Khadija did what she did prior to getting married to Rasulullah. And the way it worked was that she would have employees, she would have individuals reporting to her and making the money that she did. But when she married Rasulullah, here's what happened. Khadija sent a message to the Holy Prophet to come and ask for her hand in marriage. Because once again, she noticed the Prophet's reliability, trustworthiness. She saw the signs that have been recorded in ancient scriptures about the final messenger, and she connected the dots. So she sent him a message through her servant that ultimately in that society, the way marriages would be initiated was that the man would have to come with his family and ask for the girl's hand in marriage. So Rasulullah spoke to his uncle Abu Talib, and they all went to Waraqat ibn Nawfal, who was the uncle of Khadija. They went. The story is mentioned in great detail in Al-Kafi and other sources. Abu Talib spoke and addressed the family of Khadija by saying that you will never find anyone like my nephew Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. You can look far and wide. Anyone else, if compared to my nephew, la rajuha alayh, you will see how he is superior and better in every conceivable way. And he wishes to marry your daughter Khadija. He desires her, and so does she. So even in the proposal, he was open about the fact that Khadija wanted the Prophet and the Prophet wanted her. Then, after Abu Talib spoke once again at length about the virtues of the Holy Prophet, the other side, Waraqat ibn Nawfal, also spoke and said, we acknowledge everything that you have said. Rasulullah was well known. Yes, he was poor. Yes, he was an orphan. But everyone knew just what kind of an incredibly exceptional individual he was. And so he said, we acknowledge all of this. وَإِنِّي أَنْكَحْتُ خَدِيجَةَ min Muhammad. I marry them, I give my blessings. Then Abu Talib said that the dowry shall be 500 silver coins. Very specific. 500. Rasulullah stipulated this. Listen to this, brothers and sisters. There's a lesson in this. Rasulullah says, I have never married anyone else, and I have never gotten married myself except based on the dowry of Khadija. The dowry of Khadija has become the standard. Now, of course, you can demand more money. You can demand hundreds of thousands of dollars if you wanted. You could make all kinds of conditions if you want. But if you want to follow the tradition of Rasulullah and Khadija, if you wish to be blessed the way Khadija was blessed and the way Rasulullah and his lineage was blessed, then you try and emulate the example that they set as much as you possibly can. 500 silver coins, which in today's money is about $1,200. That's it. Khadija said, I will pay the dowry no matter how much it was. In fact, according to one report, she brought in camel loads of gold and she put it all in the room, and it was so much that it was too high and the two sides couldn't even see each other. She said, I will pay the dowry myself. Here is the dowry. I give it to you. to the Holy Prophet, take it and give it to me if you wish. Rasulullah said, your dowry will be 500 silver coins. Khadija said, I will pay that as well. So then they finished. They all came to an agreement. Rasulullah got up and was about to leave. One source says the following. Khadija called the Holy Prophet. She said to him, Ya Muhammad, al-baytu baytuk. Where are you going? Stay. This is your house. Wal-amatu amatuk. And I am your maid. Then she sent a message to Rasulullah saying, I give you all of my wealth. Those who have feministic objectives, who call Khadija a businesswoman, should also mention the fact that Khadija forfeited her entire portfolio, all of her possessions, all of her gold, everything that she owned to Rasulullah on the first night of her wedding. Everything was given to the Holy Prophet. She was never a businesswoman after that. Which is why I ask my dear sisters to support your husbands. Support them, help them. Look at this hadith. The hadith says, جاء رجل إلى رسول الله. This is in our primary sources in the four original books. A man came to Rasulullah and he described his wife to the Prophet. He said, إِنَّ لِي زَوْجَةً إِذَا دَخَلْتُ تَلَقَّتْنِي. Every time I come into the house, she would greet me at the door. These values are almost gone now. And if you speak about them, you're considered backwards and a misogynist and all these other labels that they slap on you. But this is the hadith of Rasulullah. Every time I come home, she comes to greet me. The husband is tired. He's been working. He's been dealing with all kinds of things outside. A smile from you will upend his entire life. It will change his mood. She greets me at the door. وَإِذَا خَرَجْتُ شَيَّعَتْنِي. And every time I'm about to leave the house, she would walk me all the way to the door. SubhanAllah. We do that with strangers. We do that with guests. We do that with clients. But when it comes to our own husband, suddenly it's misogynistic. She would walk me to the door. وَإِذَا رَأَتْنِي مَهْمُومًا قَالَتْ لِي. Every time she sees that I'm depressed, I'm upset for some reason, she would say to me, مَا يَهُمُّكَ. What is it that's causing you distress? Why are you upset? إِن كُنْتَ تَهْتَمُّ لِرِزْقِكَ. If you're upset over your sustenance, over your livelihood, over financial matters, then you should know that قَدْ تَكَفَّلَ لَكَ بِهِ غَيْرُكَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed your livelihood. You're not going to starve to death. Subhanallah. A wife telling her husband that you shouldn't worry about money? It's usually the other way around. It's usually a whole list of demands. I want this and I want that. And suddenly this woman of all women is telling her husband that you shouldn't worry about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken responsibility for that. وَإِن كُنْتَ تَهْتَمُّ بِأَمْرِ آخِرَتِكَ. And if you're upset over your afterlife, over what's going to happen to you when you die, فَزَادَكَ اللَّهُ هَمًّا. May Allah increase your distress and your anguish. In other words, that's the good kind of distress to have. You should be more upset about that. The akhirah matters much more than the dunya. Subhanallah. فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ. The Prophet said to this man, إِنَّ لِلَّهِ عُمَّالًا وَهَذِهِ مِنْ عُمَّالِهَا لَهَا نِصْفُ أَجْرِ الشَّهِيدِ. Allah has agents who work on His behalf on this earth. And your wife is one of the agents of Allah. And that she has the reward, half the reward of a martyr in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A woman like this. Sometimes our respected sisters feel inadequate. They feel like they should do more. Somebody sent me a message just a couple of days ago saying that I see there's a man in the community and he does so much and he has a hay'ah. In other words, he organizes majalis and he goes out there and he serves the zuwar and that sort of stuff. And I always feel jealous of him because I'm just sitting at home, I'm not doing anything. I said to her, who told you that your responsibility is the same as that man? There are plenty of things you can do. Sometimes some of our sisters feel inadequate and I say to them, look at this hadith. Half the reward of a martyr who shivers in his blood as it gushes out when he's dying, Allah has given to this woman for just treating her husband with respect, honoring him, supporting him. This is what Khadija did to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. I'll conclude with this, and I do apologize for taking so much of your time. The Holy Prophet once said, again, one of his wives became envious, and she called Khadija Khadijah. And Khadija is a derogatory term. It has a negative meaning. SubhanAllah, how much they used to hurt Rasulullah. Like the most delicate thing for Rasulullah was his beloved wife. And even though she's not even around anymore, they would try and hurt the Prophet. And I've seen how some commentators, Sunni commentators, once again, they bend over backwards to try and justify these hadiths. They say, oh, what this tells us is that it's okay for a woman to be jealous. How does it say it's okay? They're hurting Rasulullah. The Prophet would be insulted when his wife was insulted. In one hadith it says that this particular individual was screaming at Fatima az-Zahra, tusayihuha. And she was calling her Ya bint Khadija. Instead of ascribing Fatima to Rasulullah, instead of saying Ya bint Rasulullah, she would call her Ya bint Khadija. Do you think that your mother had any virtue that we don't have? Do you think your mother was better than us? Wallah, she was not better than us. At this moment, Fatima az-Zahra began crying. Imagine, this is how you speak to an orphan? This is how you address someone who's lost her mother? Rasulullah walks in and he sees Fatima crying. So he says, Ya binta Muhammad, O daughter of Muhammad, what is it that makes you cry? She said, she didn't even say everything that woman had told her. She said, she mentioned my mother, فَانْتَقَصَتْهَا. She spoke badly against my mother. That's why I'm crying. Rasulullah looked at that woman. He said to her, Mahya Humayra, be quiet. Khadija was the best thing that ever happened to me. وَقَدْ رُزِقْتُ حُبَّهَا. Rizq is a sustenance from Allah, isn't it? It is something that God graces us with. Rasulullah said that Allah graced me with the sustenance of the love of Khadija. It was a rizq from Allah. Now imagine when this woman passed from this world, Rasulullah didn't declare a day of commemoration, a day of sadness, or a week or a month. He called the entire year Amul Huzn, the year of sadness, having lost Khadija. They say that when she was about to die, and Khadija died of starvation, maybe she was poisoned to death, who knows? The same as Abu Talib, maybe he was poisoned to death. I don't want to get into that. But at the very least, Khadija died under an extreme embargo. She starved to death. On her deathbed, Rasulullah came to her. She said a few things. The first was, Ya Rasulullah, could you give me your cloak? I wish to be wrapped with your aba'ah. When I'm lowered into my grave, I want to meet my Creator, being wrapped with the cloak of Rasulullah. Rasulullah said, of course, Ya Khadija, Ya al-Zahra. You were so loyal to me. You gave me everything you had. You sacrificed so much. And they also say that before she died, she said to the Holy Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, look after my daughter Fatima. Try and protect her. Khadija was abandoned by everyone. She was the target of slander and attacks, even though prior to Islam she was called At-Tahira, the pure one. At a time When Hind, the mother of Muawiyah, was known to be a prostitute, Khadija was the pure one. She lived in a society like this with utmost purity. And yet, they attacked her, they abandoned her, they excommunicated her, and so she knows what is about to come in the way of her daughter Fatima. She said, Ya Rasulullah, look after our daughter. Rasulullah said, of course I will. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. Ya Khadija, O mother of Islam, O mother of the Imams, O mother of Fatima, where were you? And where was Rasulullah when 40 armed men ambushed the house of Fatima? When Fatima was stuck behind the door, between the wall and the door of the house, where were you both when she was crushed and her infant boy was killed, and she called out, Abatah ya Rasulallah, O Father, O God's Messenger, ahakadha yuf'alu bihabibatik. Look at what they're doing to your sweetheart. One more thing, you have to remember Karbala as well. When Khadija told Rasulullah to look after her daughter Fatima, yes, they were strangers, yes, they were abandoned, but at the very least she left Fatima to a loving father. Her father was still alive. And yet lahfi alayk ya Aba Abdullah wa Husaynah wa Gharibah. When Imam al-Hussein is leaving this world, who does he leave his orphans to? He leaves them all to Zainab. He says, O Khayya, look after the orphans after me. And he knows that Zainab will be the target of those whips, just like Sakina and Ruqayya will. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم.